My name is Sabrina Hale, and for many years there was one question that stayed in my mind. How can a place called home stop feeling like home? Before life became complicated, things were simple. A small house in Charlotte, North Carolina, a loving father, a caring mother, and a childhood filled with ordinary moments that felt special. My father, Gideon Hale, was the kind of person who never needed to have a lot of money to make his family happy. He worked hard, stayed honest, and always found a way to make the people around him feel important. The smallest things mattered to him. A family dinner, a walk outside, or a simple conversation at the end of the day was enough to make him smile. Some of the best memories from childhood were the quiet ones. Sitting beside my father while he fixed something around the house, listening to his stories, and watching how patiently he handled every problem. Those moments felt normal back then, but later they became the memories I held onto the most. My mother, Naomi, and my father were not perfect, but they loved each other. They built a small life together and did everything they could to give me a happy childhood. Then, without any warning, everything changed. The day my father passed away was the day our family lost the person who held everything together. The house was the same, but the feeling inside it was completely different. The laughter became quieter, the conversations became shorter, and the future suddenly felt uncertain. My mother tried to stay strong. She woke up every morning, went to work, handled the bills, and tried to make sure I did not see how much pain she was carrying. But a child notices more than adults think. The tired look on her face, the quiet moments when she thought nobody was watching, and the way she would sit alone after a long day told a story she never wanted to say out loud. Money became a constant worry. Things that once felt normal became difficult. My mother was trying to rebuild a life that had changed overnight, but she was doing it while carrying grief in her heart. During those years, there was one thing that remained clear: she loved me. Even when life became difficult, she always tried to protect me. After some time, Naomi met Victor Mercer. At first, Victor seemed like someone who could bring stability back into our lives. He spoke calmly, acted responsible, and made my mother feel like she did not have to face everything alone anymore. It was difficult to accept someone new after losing my father. A part of me still missed the life we had before. But seeing my mother smile again made me hope that maybe things could become better. Maybe this was a new beginning. Maybe our family could heal. At that time, there was no way to know that the person who entered our lives to bring comfort would become the reason everything changed again. After Victor became part of our family, life looked normal from the outside. People around us saw a mother who had found support after a difficult time and a family that was moving forward. For a while, even I wanted to believe that everything would be okay. Victor knew how to make a good impression. Around other people, he was polite, calm, and caring. He spoke kindly to my mother and acted like he wanted the best for us. But slowly, things started changing inside our home. It was not one big moment that made everything feel different. It was a lot of small things that slowly built up over time. The way he spoke, the way he looked at me, and the way he reminded me that I was not the same as everyone else in the house. Small comments started becoming painful. Whenever money was discussed, Victor made sure I knew that he was the one paying for everything. He reminded me that I was living under his roof and that I should appreciate what he provided. At first, those words were ignored. It felt easier to stay quiet than to create another problem for my mother. She had already lost so much, and the last thing I wanted was to become another reason for her stress. Then Ethan was born. When Ethan came into our lives, he was just a small child who needed love and care. There was never a moment when he felt like anything less than my little brother. The difference between us never mattered. The early years with him were actually some of the happier moments after my father's death. Watching him grow, helping my mother with him, and seeing his little smile brought some warmth back into the house. As Ethan got older, something began to change. The things Victor said around him started affecting the way he saw the world. He began hearing that family was only about blood, and that Sabrina was different because she had another father. At first, those words meant nothing to Ethan. He was just a child. But children often believe the things they hear repeatedly from the people they trust. Slowly, the way he looked at me changed. The little boy who once came to me for help started keeping his distance. The child who once called me his sister started repeating words that sounded like they came from someone else. Naomi noticed it too. Many times, she tried to explain to Ethan that being a family was not only about sharing the same parents. She told him that love and respect mattered more than anything. But every time she defended me, Victor made it seem like she was choosing me over her own son. That created a pain my mother never talked about. She loved both of us, but she was stuck between protecting her daughter and keeping peace inside the house. And slowly, silence became the easiest choice for everyone. The home that once felt like a place filled with love started feeling like a place where every word had to be carefully chosen. As the years passed, the distance inside our home became harder to ignore. The same rooms that once held happy memories slowly became places where everyone walked carefully, almost afraid of saying the wrong thing. School became the one place where life felt a little different. Outside those walls, there was no need to explain who I was or why I belonged somewhere. It was simply a place to learn, to focus, and to imagine a future beyond the problems waiting at home. During those years, baking became something special. It started as a small interest, nothing more than trying new recipes and learning little techniques whenever there was free time. But slowly, it became the one thing that brought peace during difficult days. There was something comforting about turning simple ingredients into something beautiful. A plain mixture could become a cake, cupcakes, or something that made another person smile. That feeling was different from everything else happening around me. My father had always encouraged that side of me. Before he was gone, he would always be the first person to taste anything I made. Even when something was not perfect, he would smile and tell me that trying was what mattered. Those memories stayed close. But not everyone in the house saw things the same way. Victor believed that anything I enjoyed was a waste of time. He often said that hobbies would not create a future and that I needed to stop thinking about things that were unrealistic. Those words were difficult to hear, but over time, they became something I learned to live with. Arguing never changed his mind. Explaining my feelings only created more tension. So most days were spent quietly, focusing on school and keeping dreams to myself. Ethan was changing too. The little brother who once followed me around was now a teenager who carried many of Victor's opinions. He no longer saw me the same way. There were moments when his words sounded exactly like his father's, and those moments hurt more because they came from someone I once cared for so deeply. Still, a part of me kept hoping things would change. Maybe one day Ethan would remember the years before all those words filled his mind. Maybe he would understand that being a sister was never about sharing the same last name or the same father. Naomi saw the tension between us, but she was fighting her own battles. She wanted peace in the house, and sometimes that meant staying quiet when she should have spoken. That silence was painful, because there is a different kind of hurt that comes when someone you love sees your pain but feels too afraid to stop it. By the time I reached my late teenage years, one thing had become clear. The biggest challenge of my life was no longer losing the family I once had. It was learning how to survive inside the family I still had. By the time I reached 19, I had learned how to read the mood of the house before even walking through the front door. A quiet room usually meant someone was upset. A simple question could turn into an argument. Even normal conversations sometimes felt like they carried a hidden danger. Most days were spent trying not to create problems. School was still important to me, and I wanted to build a future for myself. I knew education was one of the few things that could help me become independent, but living in that house made everything harder. It was difficult to focus when there was always tension waiting in the background. Baking remained the one thing that made me feel calm. Whenever there was a chance, the kitchen became my escape. Creating something from simple ingredients reminded me that not everything in life was broken. Sometimes, I imagined having a small bakery one day. A place where people came in because they wanted something I created. A place where my name was connected to something positive. But those dreams felt impossible when Victor was around. He never encouraged them. He often reminded me that I needed to be realistic and that I should not expect anyone to support my ideas. Over time, Ethan started following the same attitude. At 17, he was no longer the little boy who once asked me for help with everything. He had become someone who believed he had more power in the house because Victor made him feel that way. One evening, Ethan came into my room with a school project in his hands. He dropped it on the table and asked me to complete it for him. The request itself was not the problem. Helping him was something I had done many times before. But this time, I wanted him to understand that some responsibilities had to be his own. The answer was simple. The project was his, so he needed to do the main work. Help was fine, but I could not do everything for him. That small answer changed his mood completely. The frustration that had been building inside him came out all at once. Years of hearing the same words from Victor had shaped the way he saw me. He started saying things that were painful to hear. He talked about the house as if it belonged only to him and his father. He made it clear that he did not see me as a real part of the family. For a moment, the room felt silent. The person standing in front of me was my younger brother, but the words coming from him belonged to someone else. The argument became louder, and the anger that had been growing for years finally reached a point where it could not be ignored anymore. And that night, everything changed. Because sometimes a single moment can reveal the truth about a relationship that has been breaking for years. That night started like any other difficult evening in our house. A simple request turned into an argument that was never really about the school project. It was about years of anger, the words Ethan had heard, and the way he had slowly been taught to see me as someone who did not belong. Ethan stood there repeating the same things Victor had said many times before. He talked as if I was a stranger living in their home. He said I had no right to tell him what to do and that I should remember who was actually supporting me. Those words hurt more than I expected. Not because they came from Victor, because they came from Ethan. For years, there was still a small part of me that believed my brother would eventually understand. I believed that somewhere behind all those angry words, he was still the same little boy who used to smile when I made something for him. But that night, it felt like that hope was disappearing. The argument became worse. Voices became louder. Naomi heard the noise and rushed toward us, trying to understand what was happening. The moment she saw how far things had gone, she immediately stepped between us. For the first time in a long time, she did not stay quiet. She looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes and reminded him that I was his sister. She told him that anger did not give anyone the right to hurt another person. Ethan was shocked by her reaction. He was not used to seeing his mother stand against him. For a moment, the entire house became silent. Naomi had spent years trying to keep peace, but she finally realized that staying silent was also causing damage. That night was not only about one argument. It was about everything that had been ignored for years. Later, while sitting alone, the reality of my situation started becoming impossible to avoid. The place that was supposed to be my home no longer felt safe or peaceful. The people I wanted to feel close to were the same people who made me feel like I did not belong. My mother came to talk to me. She looked tired, hurt, and full of regret. She wanted to say something, but sometimes even words are not enough to repair years of pain. And deep inside, a feeling started growing. Maybe staying in that house was no longer the answer. Maybe the only way to find peace was to finally leave. The next few days felt different. The house was quieter than before, but this time the silence did not feel peaceful. It felt like everyone was avoiding a conversation that needed to happen. My mother tried to act normal, but I could see the sadness in her eyes. She knew something had changed between us. She knew the words spoken that night had caused a pain that could not simply disappear. I wanted to believe that things could still be fixed. A part of me wanted my mother to say that everything would be okay and that I still had a place in that house. But deep down, I already knew the truth. The problem was not just one argument. It was years of being made to feel like I was a burden. It was years of hearing that I was different. It was years of trying to prove that I deserved the same respect as everyone else. A few days later, my mother sat with me and had a conversation I never expected to hear. Her voice was quiet, and she looked like someone who had been fighting with herself for a long time. She told me that she loved me. She told me that leaving me was the last thing she wanted. But she also admitted that she did not know how to protect me while staying in that house. Those words hurt because they came from the person I needed the most. My mother explained that Victor would never accept me as his own child, and Ethan had already learned to see me through his father's eyes. She said she was afraid that if I stayed, the situation would only become worse. For a moment, there was nothing to say. The woman who had always been my home was now telling me that I needed to find another place to live. She opened a small envelope and placed it in my hands. Inside was the money she had managed to save over time. It was not a lot, but it was everything she could give me. She told me to use it carefully, find a small place, and try to build a life where I could finally feel safe. Leaving that house felt like losing my family for the second time. The The first time was when my father died. The second time was when I realized that staying was hurting me more than leaving. My mother hugged me tightly that day. Neither of us wanted to let go, but we both knew things could not continue the same way. With a small bag, a little money, and a heart full of fear, a new chapter of my life began. I had no idea where I would live, how I would survive, or what would happen next. But for the first time in years, the future was mine to create. The first night in my own place was one of the hardest nights I had ever experienced. The apartment was small, much smaller than the house I had grown up in. There was an old kitchen, a tiny bedroom, and just enough space for the few things I had brought with me. It was not the kind of place I had dreamed about. But it was mine. For the first time in years, there was no one telling me that I did not belong. No one reminding me that I was a burden. No one making me feel like I had to earn the right to exist in a place. The silence felt strange at first. I sat there looking around the empty apartment, trying to understand how my life had changed so quickly. A few days earlier, I was still living with my mother. Now I was completely on my own. There were moments when I wanted to go back. Not because things were better there, but because leaving behind people you love is never easy. My mother was still my mother. No matter how much I was hurt, I knew she loved me. I knew she had been trapped between fear, guilt, and the life she had built with Victor. But love does not always fix everything. Sometimes people can love you and still fail to protect you. The next morning, reality started to feel heavier. The money my mother gave me was limited. Every dollar had a purpose. Rent, food, supplies, and daily needs all had to be carefully planned. There was no one coming to save me. For the first time, every decision was mine. That fear could have broken me, but something inside me refused to give up. I remembered my father. I remembered the way he always told me that difficult times did not define a person. What mattered was what someone did after those difficult moments. So I started with the only thing that had always brought me comfort: baking. The small kitchen in that apartment became the beginning of something I never expected. There were no expensive tools, no perfect setup, and no customers waiting for me. There was only a dream and the determination to make it real. I started practicing again. Simple cakes, cupcakes, small desserts, every attempt was a lesson. Some turned out better than others, some needed more work. But slowly, the kitchen that once felt empty started feeling like a place where a new life was being created. At that point, there was no business, no followers, no big orders. Just a girl trying to rebuild herself one small step at a time. The first few weeks were not easy. Starting over sounded simple when people talked about it, but living it was completely different. Every morning began with questions that had no easy answers. Would there be enough money for the month? Would anyone ever find my baking? Was this dream even possible? Those thoughts followed me everywhere. But giving up was never an option. The small kitchen became my workplace. The counter was limited, the equipment was basic, and everything had to be done carefully because wasting ingredients meant wasting money. Every cake had to be made with patience. Every order, even the smallest one, had to be treated like it was the most important thing in the world. Slowly, I started sharing pictures of my baking online. At first, almost nobody noticed. The page had only a few followers. Most of them were people I already knew. There were no big comments, no hundreds of messages, and no sudden success. Just a quiet beginning, but those few people mattered. One person liked a picture. Another person shared it. Someone asked if I could make cupcakes for a small gathering. It was not a huge order, but it felt like a sign. Someone was actually interested in something I created. That feeling was difficult to explain. After years of being told that my ideas did not matter, having someone value my work felt like discovering a part of myself that I thought I had lost. I started learning more. I practiced different designs, improved my recipes, and paid attention to every small detail. There were still difficult days. Some days, orders did not come. Some days, the kitchen felt too quiet. Some nights, memories of my old home came back, and I wondered if leaving was the right choice. But then I would look at the things I had created and remember that this little apartment was the first place where I was building something for myself. A few months earlier, I was living in a place where I felt unwanted. Now, even with all the struggles, I had a place where every small success belonged to me. I did not know it yet, but this tiny beginning would eventually become the foundation of a life I never thought I could have. The small changes started happening slowly. At first, there were only a few customers. A neighbor ordered cupcakes for a family gathering. Someone who saw the pictures online asked about a birthday cake. These were not big orders, but every single one meant something. Each customer was a reminder that this dream was becoming real. The biggest challenge was not only making the desserts, it was learning everything that came with running a small business. Taking orders, managing money, buying ingredients, answering messages, and making sure every customer received something they loved. There were days when exhaustion felt overwhelming, but the excitement of seeing people enjoy the cakes made everything worth it. During this time, the old memories still came back sometimes. Certain moments reminded me of my father. The way he used to smile when trying something I made. The way he always encouraged me, even when I doubted myself. Those memories became motivation. The goal was no longer just to survive. The goal was to build something that proved all those painful words from the past were wrong. One evening, while checking my small baking page, a message appeared from someone who wanted to place an order. It was not a huge order, but it was the first time a complete stranger had found my work and trusted me. That moment felt different. The little page that started with only a few followers was slowly reaching people. A few weeks later, another customer recommended my cakes to a friend. Then another person shared my work online. The growth was still slow, but it was real. Around that time, an unexpected message arrived from someone I had not seen in years. It was from my old culinary arts teacher, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks. She had seen my baking page and recognized my name. Her message was simple. She wanted to know how I was doing and why I had disappeared after leaving school. For a moment, I stared at the screen without knowing what to say. There were many things I had never told anyone, but somehow, seeing her name brought back memories of a time when someone believed in my talent before I even believed in myself. That message became the beginning of a new chapter in my journey. Seeing Mrs. Evelyn Brooks' message brought back many memories from my school days. She was one of the few people who noticed my passion for baking before anyone else did. She always told me that talent was not enough. A person also needed patience, courage, and the willingness to keep learning. For a few minutes, I just looked at her message. A part of me wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to explain why I disappeared, why I stopped coming to school, and why life had changed so suddenly. So I finally replied. The conversation started with simple questions, but slowly the truth came out. I told her that after everything changed at home, finishing school became difficult. I told her that I had to leave and start living on my own. Mrs. Brooks did not judge me. She did not ask why I could not fix things or why I did not stay longer. She simply listened. Sometimes, all a person needs is someone who listens without making them feel guilty. After hearing my story, she asked about my baking. When I told her about my small page and the few orders I had received, she was genuinely happy. She told me that I should not hide my talent. A few days later, she shared my baking page on her Instagram and Facebook. She wrote about the effort behind my work and encouraged people in the local community to support a young baker who was trying to build something of her own. I did not expect much. I had learned not to expect things to suddenly become easy. But that evening, my phone started receiving notifications. One message became two messages became several. People were asking about cupcakes, birthday cakes, and small dessert orders. It was not a huge success overnight, but for the first time, the possibility felt real. Then Mrs. Brooks placed an order herself. She wanted cupcakes for a school staff event. That order meant more than just money. It was proof that someone believed my work was worth something. I spent hours making sure everything was perfect. Every cupcake was prepared carefully because I knew this was not just another order. This was a chance to show what I could do. When the staff tried the cupcakes, the response was better than I expected. People asked where they could order from me. Some took pictures and shared them online. And slowly, the small dream that started inside a tiny apartment kitchen began reaching more people. After that staff event, things started changing little by little. The number of messages increased, and the small baking page that once felt invisible started getting attention from people in the community. There was still a lot of work behind every order. Nothing became easy overnight. Every cake required planning, every ingredient had to be counted carefully, and every customer had to feel that their order was special. But for the first time in a long time, the hard work was creating something positive. A few weeks later, one of the teachers who had tried the cupcakes contacted me again. She loved the quality of the desserts and wanted to order something bigger for a family celebration. It was my first order that felt like a real opportunity. The order was for a custom cake and a large amount of cupcakes. The design was more complicated than anything made before, and the pressure was high. There were moments of doubt while preparing everything. The fear of making a mistake was always there. But the thought of disappointing the people who trusted me pushed me to work harder. When the order was delivered, the reaction was better than expected. The customer loved everything. A few days later, she posted pictures of the cake and tagged my baking page. More people started discovering my work. That was the moment I realized something important. A small opportunity given at the right time can completely change someone's direction. Mrs. Brooks had not solved my problems. She had not built my business for me. She had simply opened a door. Walking through that door was my responsibility. The page continued growing slowly. More local customers started placing orders. Birthday cakes became regular requests. Cupcakes became popular for small events. The little kitchen that once only held a dream was now becoming the place where that dream was turning into reality. There were still difficult days, but they felt different now. The struggles were no longer proof that I was failing. They were proof that I was building something. As the months passed, the small baking page started becoming something much bigger than I had imagined. It was still not a huge business, but it was no longer just a dream sitting inside a small apartment kitchen. The orders became more regular. People who had tried my cupcakes started coming back for birthdays, family gatherings, and special occasions. Some customers even recommended my work to their friends, and those small recommendations slowly became the reason more people discovered my baking. Every new order brought a different kind of happiness. There was a time when I wondered if anyone would ever care about something I created. Now, people were trusting me with moments that mattered to them. A birthday, an anniversary, a celebration with family. These were not just cakes anymore. They were part of someone's memories. That responsibility made me work even harder. I learned how to manage my time better. I created a schedule for taking orders, buying supplies, preparing designs, and delivering everything on time. The small mistakes from the beginning became lessons that helped me improve. My followers were also growing slowly. First, it was only a few hundred people. Then it reached 2,000. It was still a small number compared to big online businesses, but to me, every follower represented someone who believed in my work. The most surprising part was seeing strangers support me. People who knew nothing about my past were appreciating what I created in the present. That feeling was something I had never experienced before. For years, I had been made to feel like I was only someone who needed help. But now, I was becoming someone who could create value for others. Around that time, I received a message from a woman who had seen my cakes through a recommendation. She was planning a family celebration and wanted something custom. The order was bigger than anything I had handled before. It was stressful, but it was also exciting. For the first time, I started seeing a future where baking was not just a way to survive. It could become the life I was building for myself. And slowly, the girl who once left home with only a small amount of money and a lot of fear was beginning to believe that maybe her story was not ending. Maybe it was only beginning. The bigger orders did not come all at once. They arrived slowly, one person at a time, one recommendation at a time. But each new customer brought more confidence. The woman who placed the larger order was so happy with the result that she shared my baking page with her friends and family. Soon, more people started asking about custom cakes for their own celebrations. Birthday cakes, cupcakes, and dessert boxes became a regular part of my week. The small table in my apartment kitchen that once felt like a temporary setup started feeling like the beginning of something real. There were days when the kitchen was crowded with supplies, boxes, and baking tools, but instead of feeling overwhelmed, there was a sense of purpose. For the first time, hard work did not feel like a punishment. It felt like progress. The page continued growing. A few hundred followers became a few thousand. Then, after months of consistency, the number reached 10,000. Seeing that number on the screen was emotional. It was not because of the number itself. It was because every person behind that number represented a choice to believe in something I had created. The same person who once heard that her dreams were unrealistic was now building a name for herself. But success also came with new challenges. More orders meant more responsibility. There were late nights, busy mornings, and moments when everything had to be planned perfectly. A single mistake could affect a customer's special day. Still, those challenges felt different from the ones before. Back then, problems came from people who wanted to make me feel small. Now, problems came because I was growing. And that difference changed everything. During this time, Mrs. Evelyn Brooks continued supporting my journey from a distance. She never treated me like someone who needed to be saved. She treated me like someone who had the ability to create something meaningful. That belief stayed with me, because sometimes one person believing in you is enough to remind you that your own dreams are worth fighting for. The little baking page that started with a few pictures and a small hope was slowly becoming a real business. And I still had no idea how far it would eventually go. The next stage of the journey came with opportunities I never expected. The small orders that once felt like huge achievements slowly turned into bigger requests. People were no longer only asking for cupcakes or simple birthday cakes. They started asking for custom designs, special themes, and desserts for important events. Every order reminded me how far things had changed. There was a time when the future felt impossible. There was a time when leaving home felt like losing everything. But now, the same hands that once packed a small bag to leave were building something completely new. One afternoon, a message arrived from a customer who had seen my work through a recommendation. She was planning a wedding for someone close to her family and wanted to discuss a custom wedding cake. A wedding cake was different. It was not just another order. It was something people remembered forever. The idea was exciting, but it also brought a lot of pressure. Creating a cake for such an important day meant there was no room for carelessness. Every detail mattered, from the design to the final presentation. For days, planning became the main focus. The design, the flavors, the decorations, and every small detail had to be perfect. When the wedding day arrived and the cake was delivered, the reaction was something I would never forget. The family was happy. The guests loved the design. People asked where the cake came from, and several of them followed my page afterward. That one order opened another door. More wedding inquiries started coming in. More people discovered my work through recommendations. The name Sweet Crumbs by Sabrina was slowly becoming known in the community. The business was still growing, but now it had a direction. The apartment kitchen that once felt like a place of loneliness had become the place where dreams were being built. My followers continued increasing. 10,000 became 20,000. 20,000 became even more. The number was growing, but what mattered more was the trust behind it. People were not only buying cakes, they were trusting me with their special moments. And that was something I never took for granted. For the first time, life was not about proving that I belonged somewhere. It was about creating a place where I belonged. As the business grew, life became busier than ever before. The small kitchen that once felt empty was now filled with the sounds of mixers, timers, and the constant movement of preparing orders. There were mornings when the day started before sunrise and nights when the final order was completed much later than expected. It was exhausting, but it was a kind of exhaustion that came with happiness. Every successful delivery felt like a small victory. The biggest change was not just the number of customers. It was the way people started seeing the work. It was no longer just a hobby or a simple baking page. It had become something people trusted. The social media page continued growing. More pictures were shared, more customers left positive reviews, and more people started recommending the cakes to others. The followers reached 50,000. Seeing that number was emotional, but the journey behind it mattered more than the number itself. Those 50,000 people had found the page because of hard work, patience, and countless hours spent improving every detail. Around that time, the apartment started feeling smaller. There were more supplies, more equipment, and more orders than the space could handle. A bigger workspace became necessary. Finding a small studio kitchen was the next goal. It was not a luxury place. It was simple and practical, but it gave enough space to create more designs and handle larger orders. Moving into that space brought back memories of the first apartment, the place where everything started, the place where there was fear, uncertainty, and many nights spent wondering if the future would ever become better. Now, that same person was standing in a new space, surrounded by tools that represented growth. But even with all the success, some memories never disappeared. There were still moments when thoughts went back to the family that was left behind. The pain was not as fresh as before, but some wounds take years to understand. Success had changed many things, but it had also taught an important lesson. A person does not always find a new beginning by forgetting the past. Sometimes, a new beginning comes from accepting the past and choosing to build something better. After moving into the new workspace, everything started feeling more real. The small apartment kitchen where the journey began was now a memory. It was the place where the first cupcakes were made, the first orders were packed, and the first steps toward independence were taken. The new space was not perfect, but it represented something important: growth. There was now room to organize supplies, prepare larger orders, and create more detailed designs. The work was still difficult, but the difference was that every effort was building something. The business continued expanding through word of mouth. Customers who had ordered once came back again. Some brought friends. Some recommended the cakes for office events, birthdays, and family celebrations. Slowly, the name started becoming familiar. The social media page kept growing too. More people followed the journey, not only because of the cakes, but because they could see the effort behind them. The story was no longer just about desserts. It was about rebuilding a life. By this time, the page had reached almost 100,000 followers. That number felt unreal. Years earlier, there were moments when it felt like nobody saw me. Moments when it felt like my dreams did not matter. Now, thousands of people were following something created from those same dreams. But the biggest change was inside. The confidence that had been damaged for years was slowly returning. There was no longer a need to prove worth to people who refused to see it. The work spoke for itself. One day, while preparing a wedding cake order, a familiar thought came back. The journey had started because of pain, but it was no longer controlled by pain. The past had shaped the person I became, but it did not decide where life would go next. The girl who once left home with uncertainty had built a name, a business, and a future. And yet, there was still one unfinished part of the story. Relationship with my mother. No matter how much life changed, there was still a question that remained in my heart. Would the person who once let me go ever understand what that moment did to me? For a long time, I avoided thinking about that question. Life had become busy. There were orders to complete, customers to respond to, and a business that needed constant attention. Staying focused was easier than looking back at the pain I had left behind. But some memories never completely disappear. My mother was still a part of my story. No matter what happened, she was the person who held my hand when I was a child. She was the person who stayed awake when I was sick and the person who tried to protect me in the ways she knew how. But she was also the person who watched me leave. That was the part I struggled with the most. I understood that she was afraid. I understood that she felt trapped. But a part of me still wondered why protecting me had become impossible. Months turned into years. The business kept growing and life moved forward. Then one afternoon, while preparing an order, a message appeared on my phone. The name on the screen made me stop. It was my mother. For a few seconds, I just stared at the message. There were so many emotions at once. Memories, questions, and feelings that I thought I had already accepted came back again. The message was simple. She wanted to meet. There was no long explanation, no excuses, just a request to see me. A part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part of me knew that some conversations cannot be avoided forever, so we decided to meet at a small cafe near my workspace. When she walked in, she looked different. Not because she had changed completely, but because time had changed both of us. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. For a moment, neither of us knew what to say. The woman sitting across from me was still my mother. The same woman whose voice I remembered from childhood. The same woman whose hugs once made everything feel okay. But she was also the person connected to one of the most painful moments of my life. Finally, she spoke. She told me that she had followed my journey from a distance. She had seen the baking page grow, watched people support my work, and felt proud of the person I had become. But behind those words was something else. Regret. A feeling she had carried for years. And that day, for the first time, my mother was ready to talk about the moment that changed both of our lives forever. My mother took a deep breath before speaking. She told me that the day she asked me to leave was a day she had replayed in her mind countless times. She said that even after I walked away, a part of her felt like she had lost something she could never get back. Listening to her was difficult. Because there were still memories of the pain, but there were also memories of the mother who loved me when I was younger. She explained that she had spent years trying to survive a situation she did not know how to control. She admitted that fear had made her choose silence many times when she should have spoken. Those words did not erase everything that happened. But for the first time, I could see the weight she had been carrying too. She looked at me and apologized. Not a quick apology. Not words said just to make the moment easier. It was the kind of apology that came from someone who had finally accepted the hurt they had caused. She told me she was proud of me. She said that seeing me build a life from nothing showed her the strength she always knew was inside me. Hearing that meant more than I expected. Because for years, I had wondered if my mother truly saw me. That day, I realized she did. She just had not known how to protect me the way I needed. We talked for a long time. We talked about the past, about my father, about the years we lost, and about the things we both wished had happened differently. There was no way to change what happened. The past would always be part of our story, but maybe it did not have to control our future. Before leaving, my mother looked at me and said something I would never forget. She told me that she had once worried I would not survive on my own. But now, she could see that I had built a life stronger than anyone expected. That conversation did not fix everything in one day. Healing does not happen that quickly. But it was the first step toward rebuilding something we both thought was gone forever. And as I watched her leave that cafe, one thought stayed in my mind. Sometimes people make mistakes that hurt us deeply. But sometimes, after enough time, they finally find the courage to admit those mistakes. After meeting my mother, life slowly found a new balance. We did not suddenly become the family we used to be. There were no daily phone calls or long conversations that erased the years between us. Trust takes time to rebuild, and both of us understood that. Still, something had changed. The silence that had existed between us for so many years was finally gone. From time to time, my mother would send a message asking how business was going. Sometimes she would comment on a new cake I had posted or ask if I was taking enough time to rest. Those small conversations meant more than she probably realized. Around the same time, the business reached another milestone. The number of followers continued to grow until it finally passed 100,000. Looking at that number brought back memories of the very beginning. There was a time when even 10 followers felt impossible. Then it became 100. A few hundred became 2,000. 2,000 became 10,000. 10,000 became 50,000. And now, more than 100,000 people had chosen to follow the journey. It was never about becoming popular. It was about proving to myself that dreams can grow if they are given enough time, patience, and hard work. The business had also grown beyond what the little apartment kitchen could handle. After months of planning and saving, it finally became possible to buy a small home with a larger kitchen that could also be used as a baking studio. Holding the keys for the first time was an emotional moment. For years, home had been connected to painful memories. Now, home meant something completely different. It was a place built with honesty, hard work, and peace. No one could tell me that I did not belong there. No one could make me feel unwanted. Every wall inside that house reminded me of how far life had come. Sometimes I would stand quietly in the kitchen before starting work, remembering the frightened 19-year-old girl who once wondered if she would ever be okay. If she could have seen this moment, she probably would not have believed it. But every step, every difficult day, and every disappointment had led to this place. For the first time in many years, the future no longer felt uncertain. A few weeks after our first meeting, my mother asked if we could see each other again. This time, the conversation felt different. There was less silence and more honesty. She told me that life at home had not turned out the way she once hoped. Victor had become more controlling over the years, and the same anger that was once directed at me had slowly started affecting everyone around him. Even Ethan had changed. As he grew older, he began seeing things that he had never noticed as a child. The words he had believed for so many years no longer made sense to him. One evening, he asked my mother a question she never expected. Did Sabrina really deserve everything that happened to her? My mother told me she could not answer right away. She simply looked at him and said, "No, she never did." For a long time, Ethan stayed quiet. According to my mother, that was the moment he started looking at the past differently. He remembered the argument over the school project. He remembered the cruel words he had repeated without thinking. And for the first time, he understood that they had never been his own words. They belonged to someone else. A few days later, my phone rang. The name on the screen surprised me. It was Ethan. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should answer. After taking a deep breath, I did. His voice sounded completely different from the one I remembered. There was no anger, no pride, only regret. He apologized for the way he had treated me and admitted that he had spent years believing things that should never have been said to a child. He told me he did not expect forgiveness. He only wanted me to know that he finally understood the truth. The conversation lasted only a few minutes. When it ended, there was no dramatic reunion and no promise that everything would suddenly be perfect. Some wounds need time. Some relationships can be repaired only a little at a time. But hanging up the phone, one thing became clear. The anger I had carried for so many years was finally becoming lighter. Not because the past had changed, but because I had finally stopped letting it control my future. Today, life looks very different from the life I once believed I was trapped in. Every morning begins in the kitchen of the home I worked so hard to earn. The smell of fresh bread, cakes, and cupcakes fills the room before the sun is fully up. Orders are packed, messages are answered, and another busy day begins. There are wedding cakes waiting to be delivered, birthday cakes for children who cannot wait to blow out the candles, dessert boxes for families celebrating special moments. Sometimes, while decorating a cake, I stop for a second and smile. Not because life became perfect, because there was a time when I honestly believed none of this would ever be possible. The baking page has grown beyond anything I imagined. More than 100,000 people now follow the journey. Some have been there from the very beginning, and others discovered my work only recently. Every kind message, every recommendation, and every returning customer reminds me how far this journey has come. My mother and I are still rebuilding our relationship, one step at a time. We cannot change the past, but we no longer let it decide our future. Ethan still calls from time to time. Trust is not rebuilt in a single conversation, but real change is shown through actions, not promises. That is something both of us understand now. As for Victor, his chapter in my life is over, not because I hate him, because I finally learned that peace sometimes begins the moment you stop carrying someone else's anger. People often ask how this business became successful. They expect a secret recipe or a lucky break. The truth is much simpler. Success was built one order at a time. One customer at a time. One difficult day at a time. Looking back now, I no longer see myself as the girl who was asked to leave her home. I see someone who refused to let pain decide the rest of her life. If this story reaches someone who feels unwanted, forgotten, or stuck in a place that no longer feels like home, I hope it reminds them of one thing. The place where your story begins is not always the place where it ends. Sometimes the hardest goodbye becomes the first step toward the life you were always meant to build. And looking back now, leaving that house was never the end of my story. It was the beginning of the life I was always meant to live.